Imagine waking up tomorrow and feeling instantly alert. No caffeine, no scrolling, no struggle, just energy, focus, confidence. Now imagine achieving that, not through supplements, therapy, or expensive routines, but through something as simple as turning your shower knob to cold. Sounds crazy, right? But science now shows that cold exposure dosing tea just wake you up. It rewires your brain, reshapes your nervous system, and changes how you experience stress, mood, focus, and even pain. And if you stick with it for 30 days, the changes become measurable. Not motivational hype, but biological transformation. Let me tell you a story. A few years ago, a neuroscientist decided to study why some people seemed mentally unbreakable. Not fearless, but calm under pressure. Resilient under stress. Focused even when uncomfortable. When he tracked their habits, he noticed something strange. Many of them regularly exposed themselves to cold water swims, cold showers, ice baths, not because it felt good, but because it felt uncomfortable, and yet, afterward, they felt clear, calm, and energized. That curiosity led to dozens of studies, and what researchers found was stunning. Cold exposure doesn't just affect your body, it reprograms your brain. And the reason has everything to do with your nervous system. Let's start with something simple. Your nervous system has two main modes. The sympathetic system, fight or flight. The parasympathetic system, rest and repair. Modern life traps most people in low-grade fight or flight all day. Stress, screens, deadlines, notifications, traffic, pressure, worry, noise. This keeps cortisol elevated, dopamine unstable, mood fragile, focus scattered, sleep poor, immunity weakened, and energy drained. Cold exposure forces your nervous system into a state of acute stress. But here is the key: in a controlled environment with no real danger. When cold water hits your skin, cold receptors fire instantly. These receptors send powerful signals to your brainstem and hypothalamus, the parts of your brain that regulate survival responses. Your breathing spikes, your heart rate jumps. Your body screams, "Get out now," but you don't. And that's where the magic begins. Because when you breathe slowly, stay calm, and don't panic, your brain learns something profound. I am safe in discomfort. This rewires your stress response. Instead of reacting automatically, your brain starts regulating consciously. This strengthens the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for discipline, emotional control, decision-making, and long-term thinking. In simple terms, cold showers train your brain to stay calm under stress, and that skill transfers to everything: work pressure, anxiety, social fear, conflict, cravings, fatigue, and emotional overwhelm. But let's go deeper, because the changes aren't psychological, they're biochemical. Within seconds of cold exposure, your body releases norepinephrine, the alertness and focus chemical, dopamine, the motivation and pleasure chemical endorphins, natural painkillers and mood boosters, beta endorphins, stress reducers, adrenaline, energy and readiness. One study from Stanford showed that cold exposure can increase norepinephrine by 200 to 300% at a level similar to stimulant medication, but without the crash. This explains why people feel clear, energized, calm, and uplifted after cold showers, not anxious or jittery. And unlike caffeine, this boost lasts hours, not minutes. But here's where it gets really powerful. Dopamine, the motivation chemical, doesn't just spike and crash like with sugar, social media, or drugs. Cold exposure raises baseline dopamine for hours afterward. That means after cold exposure, your brain experiences more motivation, more drive, better mood, greater focus, more resilience, less craving, less anxiety. This is why people report feelingproductive.com and emotionally stable after cold showers, even on stressful days. Now, let's talk about neuroplasticity, your brain's ability to change. Every time you voluntarily step into cold discomfort and stay calm, you strengthen neural circuits associated with emotional regulation, stress tolerance, attention control, self-discipline, impulse resistance, resilience, focus, mental endurance over time. These circuits become dominant. In neuroscience, this is called experience-dependent plasticity. Your brain rewires itself based on repeated experiences. Cold showers create repeated, short, controlled stress exposures, what scientists call hormetic stress, small stress that strengthens instead of weakens. Just like lifting weights stresses muscles so they grow stronger, cold exposure stresses your nervous system so it becomes more resilient. And this is why the effects compound over time. After one cold shower, you feel alert. After 1 week, your mood stabilizes. After 2 weeks, your stress tolerance increases. After 30 days, your baseline nervous system state changes. You're no longer constantly tense. You're not easily overwhelmed. You recover faster from stress. You stay calm under pressure. You feel mentally tougher without being numb. And this isn't placebo. Brain scans show measurable changes in regions associated with emotional regulation, attention, stress response, and executive function after consistent cold exposure training. Now, let's talk about anxiety. Anxiety isn't weakness. It's a hyperactive survival system. Your brain perceives threat where none exists. Deadlines feel like danger. Social situations feel like risk. Uncertainty feels like catastrophe. Cold exposure directly retrains this system. When cold water hits, your brain fires panic signals. But when you breathe slowly and stay, you override those signals. This teaches your amygdala, the fear center, that discomfort doesn't equal danger. Over time, your amygdala becomes less reactive, and studies show cold exposure improves symptoms of anxiety, panic disorder, depression, PTSD, stress sensitivity, emotional instability, because it strengthens top-down control from the prefrontal cortex, your rational brain, over emotional impulses. In simple terms, cold showers teach your brain not to panic. Now, let's talk about depression. Depression isn't just sadness. It's low dopamine, low norepinephrine, low serotonin, low BDNF. low motivation, low energy, and reduced neuroplasticity. Cold exposure boosts all of these. In fact, clinical research from Europe has shown cold water immersion improves depressive symptoms faster than many medications, especially in treatment-resistant depression without side effects. Why? Because cold exposure increases dopamine and norepinephrine, activates vagus nerve tone, reduces inflammation, improves sleep, enhances neuroplasticity, boosts mitochondrial function, increases BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which grows new neurons. BDNF is literally brain fertilizer, and cold exposure increases it. This is why people often describe cold showers as clearing, grounding, uplifting, stabilizing, empowering, resetting. Now, let's talk about addiction and cravings. Addiction is a dysregulated dopamine system where the brain seeks intense stimulation but can sustain motivation without it. Cold exposure retrains dopamine pathways. Instead of dopamine spikes followed by crashes like sugar, porn, nicotine, caffeine, social media, cold exposure raises baseline dopamine without the crash. This stabilizes motivation and reduces craving intensity. In fact, many people report less desire for junk food, less urge to scroll, less reliance on caffeine, less emotional eating, less compulsive behavior, because their dopamine system becomes balanced, not overstimulated. Cold showers teach your brain to generate motivation internally instead of seeking it externally. Now, let's talk about focus and attention. Cold exposure increases norepinephrine in the prefrontal cortex, the brain region responsible for attention, working memory, impulse control, and decision. This improves focus alertness, reaction time, memory, recall, mental endurance, cognitive clarity, and this isn't just subjective. Studies show cold exposure improves cognitive performance, task switching, vigilance, and mental stamina. That's why many people feel mentally sharp and clear for hours after cold showers, not wired, but centered. Now let's talk about stress tolerance. Modern stress isn't life-threatening, but your nervous system reacts like it is. This leads to burnout, anxiety, fatigue, irritability, insomnia, emotional fragility, and immune suppression. Cold exposure retrains your stress response. Every time you stay calm in cold water, your brain learns, I can handle discomfort. Over time, this belief becomes automatic. So when real stress appears, deadlines, conflict, pressure, chaos, your body doesn't panic. It responds. And that difference changes everything. Now let's talk about pain tolerance. Cold exposure activates pain-modulating pathways and releases endorphins, natural painkillers. Over time, this increases pain tolerance, reduces chronic pain perception, and improves resilience to discomfort. That's why cold therapy is used in sport recovery, injury rehabilitation, and chronic pain management. But more importantly, psychological pain tolerance improves too. You become less reactive to discomfort, physical or emotional. Now, let's talk about sleep. Cold exposure improves sleep quality by regulating circadian rhythms, increasing parasympathetic tone, lowering nighttime cortisol, improving body temperature regulation, enhancing melatonin release. People who take cold showers earlier in the day often fall asleep faster, sleep deeper, and wake more refreshed. Now, let's talk about confidence. Cold exposure builds what psychologists call self-efficacy, the belief that you can handle difficult situations. Every cold shower becomes a small daily victory over discomfort. This compounds. You start trusting yourself more. You become mentally tougher. You feel capable. You stop avoiding challenges. You stop fearing discomfort. Confidence isn't built by comfort, it's built by voluntary discomfort. Cold showers train courage, quietly, daily, consistently. Now, let's talk about the timeline. Because most people think, okay, maybe this works, but how long until I feel it? Here's what research and real-world data suggest. Day 1, 2, 3. Shock, resistance, discomfort, followed by alertness and energy. Day 4 to 7. Improved mood stability, less morning grogginess, better focus. Day 8 to 14. Reduced stress reactivity, increased confidence, better emotional control. Day 15 to 21. More motivation, less anxiety, greater resilience, better sleep. Day 22 to 30. Baseline nervous system shift. You feel calmer, clearer, mentally stronger, emotionally stable, and more energized without needing stimulation. This isn't hype, it's nervous system adaptation. Now, let's talk about how cold showers rewire your brain at the neural circuit level. Every time you resist the urge to escape cold water and instead breathe slowly and stay present, your prefrontal cortex overrides your amygdala. This strengthens top-down regulation pathways. In neuroscience terms, this increases functional connectivity, prefrontal amygdala coupling, parasympathetic tone, heart rate variability, stress resilience, emotional regulation, cognitive control. Over time, this becomes automatic. Your brain defaults to calm instead of panic. This is neural training, not motivation, and it's one of the most powerful mental training tools available because it works at the survival circuitry level, not just mindset. Now, let's talk about the breath. Cold exposure forces fast, shallow breathing at first, panic breathing, but when you slow your breath, deep nasal inhales, long controlled exhales, you activate the vagus nerve, which shifts your nervous system from fight or flight into calm control. This breath training compounds with cold exposure. You're not just tolerating discomfort, you're learning to regulate your physiology under stress. This is the same skill elite soldiers, athletes, meditators, and high-performance professionals train, but cold showers do it in minutes per day. Now, let's talk about mental discipline. Motivation fades. Discipline lasts. Cold showers train discipline daily because you don't feel like doing them, but you do them anyway. This strengthens willpower, delayed gratification, self-control, emotional regulation, habit consistency, identity strength over time. This spills into other areas. You eat better, you train more consistently, you procrastinate less, you manage stress better, you become mentally stronger. Not because you forced it, but because your nervous system changed. Now, let's talk about modern comfort culture. We live in a world designed to minimize discomfort, climate control, soft beds, instant food, dopamine on demand, endless entertainment, convenience, everything. This sounds good, but it starves the nervous system of stress adaptation, and nervous systems that don't experience controlled stress become fragile. Cold exposure restores what modern comfort removed: adaptive stress, not trauma training. This is why cold exposure improves mental toughness, stress tolerance, emotional stability, resilience, focus, energy, mood, confidence, sleep, immune function, all through one simple daily habit. Now, let's talk about why 30 days matters. Neuroplasticity works through repetition. One cold shower changes your state. 30 cold showers change your trait, your baseline. That's the difference between feeling good temporarily and becoming mentally stronger permanently. After 30 days, your nervous system adapts. Reduced baseline cortisol, higher baseline dopamine, higher parasympathetic tone, greater emotional regulation, lower stress reactivity, higher resilience, better mood stability, improved focus, stronger impulse control. This is why cold exposure feels life-changing, not because it's dramatic, but because it rewires your baseline state. Now, let's talk about fear and resistance. Most people don't avoid cold showers because of pain. They avoid them because of anticipation. The brain hates uncertainty and discomfort. But here's the truth. The discomfort lasts seconds. The benefits last hours. The rewiring lasts months. The confidence lasts years. Cold exposure teaches you that anticipation is worse than reality, a lesson that transfers to every challenge in life. Now, let's talk about safety. Cold exposure is powerful, but it must be done responsibly. Start gradually. Warm water first, then 10 to 20 seconds cold. Breathe slowly and deeply. Don't hyperventilate. Don't force extreme cold immediately. Avoid if you have uncontrolled heart conditions or severe circulatory disorders. Never combine with alcohol. Get out if you feel dizzy. Cold exposure should feel uncomfortable, not dangerous. Done properly, it's one of the safest mental training tools available. Now, let's talk about implementation, how to do cold showers properly for brain rewiring. Start with this. Week 1. End your shower with 15 to 30 seconds of cold water. Week 2. Increase to 45 to 60 seconds. Week 3. Increase to 90 to 120 seconds. Week 4. Stay in cold water for 2 to 3 minutes. During cold exposure, focus on slow nasal breathing. Relax your face, jaw, shoulders don't tense. Don't fight the cold. Allow it. Stay present. Observe sensations without panic. This trains nervous system regulation. Now, let's talk about mental framing. Don't think of cold showers as punishment, think of them as training. Not discipline, conditioning. Not suffering, adaptation. Not torture therapy. Because biologically, that's exactly what they are. Now, let's talk about identity change. After 30 days of cold exposure, something subtle happens. You stop seeing yourself as someone who avoids discomfort. You start seeing yourself as someone who can handle it. That identity shift is powerful. It changes how you approach challenges, how you manage stress, how you respond to fear, how you view discomfort, how confident you feel, how resilient you become, and identity drives behavior. This is why cold showers spill into every part of life: productivity, relationships, health, mindset, discipline, emotional stability. Now, let's talk about why this works better than motivation. Motivation fades, cold exposure rewires. Instead of forcing yourself to feel calm, your nervous system becomes calm. Instead of trying to focus, your brain becomes focused. Instead of battling anxiety, your amygdala quiets. Instead of chasing confidence, your nervous system builds it. This is physiological change, not mindset hacks. Now, let's zoom out. For thousands of years, humans were exposed to cold daily: cold rivers, cold rain, cold mornings, cold nights, cold environments. Our nervous systems evolved to adapt to cold. Modern heating removed that stimulus and, with it, a major training signal for stress adaptation. Cold exposure restores that missing stimulus safely, voluntarily, controllably. Now, let's connect everything. Cold showers. Rewire your stress response, increase dopamine and norepinephrine. Strengthen emotional regulation, improve focus and attention, reduce anxiety and depression. Improve mood stability, improve motivation, improve energy, improve mental toughness, all in minutes per day. Now imagine this. What if one habit could make you calmer under pressure, more focused at work, more resilient emotionally, more disciplined daily, more confident socially, less anxious internally, more motivated naturally, more energized consistently, more mentally strong long-term? That habit already exists. It's cold showers. Not because cold is magical, but because controlled discomfort trains the nervous system. Now, let us go deeper, because once you understand what cold showers do inside your brain and nervous system, you'll realize this isn't just a habit. It's neurological training. The moment cold water hits your skin, something dramatic happens. Your skin is packed with cold sensitive nerve receptors, far more than warm sensitive ones. These receptors fire instantly and send urgent signals to your brainstem, hypothalamus, and limbic system, the parts of your brain responsible for survival, emotion, breathing, heart rate, and stress response. Your body reacts immediately. Your breathing speeds up. Your heart rate jumps. Your muscles tense. Your mind says, "Get out." This is your sympathetic nervous system, fight or flight, turning on full force. But here's the key. When you don't escape, when you stay, slow your breathing, and remain calm, your brain experiences something rare in modern life: stress without danger. This trains your nervous system in the most powerful way possible. Instead of learning, discomfort equals threat, your brain learns discomfort is survivable. That single lesson rewires your stress circuitry. In neuroscience, this is called stress inoculation, small controlled stress exposures that build long-term resilience. It's the same principle used in elite military training, therapy for anxiety disorders, and resilience training for high-performance athletes: cold showers. Just deliver it in 2 to 3 minutes a day. Now, let's talk about neurochemistry, because this is where the mental transformation really happens. Within seconds of cold exposure, your body releases a powerful cocktail of brain chemicals. Norepinephrine increases alertness, focus, reaction time, memory, and mood. Dopamine increases motivation, pleasure, drive, and resilience. Endorphins, natural painkillers that improve mood and reduce stress. Adrenaline boosts energy and readiness. One study showed cold exposure increases norepinephrine by up to 300%. Comparable to stimulant medications, but without jitteriness or crash. Another study found dopamine levels remain elevated for hours after cold exposure, not minutes like caffeine, sugar, or social media. That means cold showers don't just wake you up, they change your baseline brain chemistry. You don't just feel good temporarily, you become more motivated, focused, and emotionally stable throughout the day. This is why people describe cold showers as mentally clearing, grounding, energizing, stabilizing, empowering, not hype. Neurobiology. Now, let's talk about dopamine stability. Modern life overstimulates dopamine, constantly scrolling. Sugar, entertainment, notifications, caffeine, porn, novelty. This causes dopamine spikes followed by crashes, leading to low motivation, craving, distraction, fatigue, anxiety, and emotional instability. Cold exposure works differently. Instead of spiking dopamine and crashing it, cold exposure raises baseline dopamine gradually and sustainably. This improves motivation, drive, mood stability, emotional regulation, focus, resilience, self-control. Many people notice after a few weeks of cold showers: less craving for junk food, less urge to scroll, less caffeine dependence, less emotional eating, less compulsive behavior. It's because their dopamine system becomes balanced, not overstimulated. Cold showers retrain your reward system to generate motivation internally instead of seeking stimulation externally. Now, let's talk about anxiety. Anxiety isn't weakness, it's a hyperactive survival system. Your brain perceives threat where none exists. Deadlines feel dangerous. Social situations feel risky. Uncertainty feels catastrophic. Cold exposure directly retrains this system. When cold water hits, your brain sends panic signals, but when you stay calm and breathe slowly, you override those signals. This strengthens top-down control from your prefrontal cortex, your rational brain, over your amygdala, your fear center. Over time, your amygdala becomes less reactive. This reduces generalized anxiety, panic responses, social anxiety, stress sensitivity, emotional reactivity, overweighting. And this isn't motivational, it's structural. Brain imaging studies show changes in amygdala reactivity and prefrontal connectivity after repeated cold exposure training. Cold showers literally rewire your fear circuits. Now, let's talk about depression. Depression isn't just sadness, it's low dopamine, low norepinephrine, low serotonin, low BDNF, low motivation, low energy, and reduced neuroplasticity. Cold exposure boosts all of these. Studies from Europe have shown cold water immersion improves depressive symptoms even in treatment-resistant cases, sometimes faster than medication. Why? Because cold exposure increases dopamine and norepinephrine, activates vagus nerve tone, reduces inflammation, improves sleep, enhances mitochondrial function, increases BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which grows new neurons. BDNF is literally brain fertilizer, and cold exposure increases it. This is why people feel clearer, lighter, and more emotionally stable after cold showers, even on difficult days. Now, let's talk about focus and cognitive performance. Cold exposure increases norepinephrine in the prefrontal cortex, the brain region responsible for focus, attention, working memory, decision-making, impulse control, mental endurance. This improves concentration, reaction time, cognitive clarity, task switching, learning ability, and the effects last hours, not minutes. That's why many people use cold showers in the morning, not just to wake up, but to mentally sharpen themselves for the day. Now, let's talk about stress tolerance and emotional resilience. Modern stress is psychological, not physical, but your nervous system reacts as if your life is in danger. This leads to burnout, anxiety, fatigue, emotional fragility, immune suppression, and chronic tension. Cold exposure retrains your stress response. Every time you stay calm in cold water, your brain learns, I can handle discomfort. That belief becomes automatic. So when real stress shows up, deadlines, conflict, pressure, chaos, your body doesn't panic. It responds. This is why people who practice cold exposure recover faster from stress, feel less overwhelmed, and stay emotionally grounded under pressure. Now, let's talk about pain tolerance. Cold exposure activates pain-modulating pathways and releases endorphins, natural painkillers. Over time, this increases pain tolerance and reduces sensitivity to discomfort, both physical and emotional. This is why cold therapy is used in sports recovery, injury rehabilitation, chronic pain management, but more importantly, psychological pain tolerance improves too. You become less reactive to discomfort, not numb, but resilient. Now let's talk about sleep. cold exposure, especially earlier in the day, improves sleep by regulating circadian rhythms, increasing parasympathetic tone, lowering nighttime cortisol, improving body temperature regulation, enhancing melatonin release. People who practice cold showers often report falling asleep faster, sleeping deeper, waking more refreshed, less nighttime anxiety. Better sleep accelerates brain repair, emotional stability, immune function, and cognitive performance. Now, let's talk about confidence and identity. Cold showers build something psychologists call self-efficacy, the belief that you can handle difficult situations. Every cold shower is a small daily victory over discomfort that compounds. You start trusting yourself more. You become mentally tougher. You feel capable. You stop avoiding challenges. You stop fearing discomfort. Confidence isn't built by comfort, it's built by voluntary discomfort. Cold exposure trains courage quietly, daily, consistently. Now let's talk about discipline and habit strength. Cold showers strengthen willpower, self-control, emotional regulation, delayed gratification, consistency, identity, stability. Because you're redoing something daily that your brain doesn't want to do, and you're redoing it anyway. That rewires habit circuitry in the basal ganglia and prefrontal cortex, making discipline easier in other areas of life too. People often notice better diet adherence, more consistent workouts, less procrastination, better time management, greater follow-through. Not because they forced it, but because their nervous system changed. Now, let's talk about neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to change. Every time you voluntarily step into cold discomfort and regulate your breathing instead of panicking, you strengthen neural circuits related to emotional control, stress regulation, focus, attention, impulse resistance, resilience, self-discipline. Over time, these circuits become dominant. This is experience-dependent plasticity. Your brain rewires itself based on repeated experiences. Cold showers create short, frequent, controlled stress exposures, exactly what the brain needs to grow stronger, not weaker. Now, let's talk about the vagus nerve, the master regulator of calm. The vagus nerve controls heart rate, digestion, inflammation, mood, immune function, and emotional regulation. Cold exposure stimulates the vagus nerve, increasing parasympathetic tone. This improves calmness, emotional regulation, heart rate variability, stress recovery, digestion, immune function. Higher vagal tone equals stronger nervous system resilience. Cold showers train vagal tone daily, without meditation, supplements, or complex techniques. Now, let's talk about why this works better than motivation. Motivation fades. Cold exposure instead of forcing yourself to feel calm, your nervous system becomes calm. Instead of trying to focus, your brain becomes focused. Instead of battling anxiety, your amygdala quiets. Instead of chasing confidence, your nervous system builds it. This is physiological change, not mindset hacks. Now, let's talk about the timeline of brain rewiring. Most people ask, how long until I feel different? Here's what research and real-world reports show. Days 1 to 3, shock, resistance, discomfort, followed by alertness and energy. Days 4 to 7. Improved mood stability, less morning grogginess, better focus. Days 8 to 14. Reduced stress reactivity, increased confidence, better emotional control. Days 15 to 21. More motivation, less anxiety, greater resilience, better sleep. Days 22 to 30. Baseline nervous system shift, calmer, clearer, mentally stronger, emotionally stable, and more energized. This isn't placebo, it's nervous system adaptation. Now, let's talk about why 30 days matters. Neuroplasticity requires repetition. One cold shower changes your state. 30 cold showers change your trait, your baseline. That's the difference between temporary alertness and permanent resilience. After 30 days, your nervous system adapts. Lower baseline cortisol, higher baseline dopamine, higher parasympathetic, tone-reduced stress reactivity, better emotional regulation, higher focus, greater mental resilience. This is why people describe cold showers as life-changing, not because they re-dramatic, but because they change your baseline. Now, let's talk about fear and resistance. Most people don't avoid cold showers because of pain. They avoid them because of anticipation. But here's the truth. The discomfort lasts seconds. The benefits last hours. The rewiring lasts months. The confidence lasts years. Cold exposure teaches your brain that anticipation is worse than reality, a lesson that transfers to every challenge in life. Now, let's talk about safety. Cold exposure is powerful, but it must be done responsibly. Start gradually, warm water first, then 10 to 20 seconds cold, breathe slowly and deeply. Don't hyperventilate. Don't force extreme cold immediately. Never combine with alcohol. Get out if you feel dizzy. Cold exposure should feel uncomfortable, not dangerous. Done properly, it's one of the safest mental training tools available. Now, let's talk about implementation, how to do cold showers for brain rewiring. Start like this. Week 1. End your shower with 15 to 30 seconds cold. Week 2. Increase to 45 to 60 seconds. Week 3. Increase to 90 to 120 seconds. Week 4, stay in cold water for 2 to 3 minutes. During cold exposure, focus on slow nasal breathing. Relax your face, jaw, shoulders. Don't tense, don't fight the cold. Allow it, stay present. Observe sensations without panic. This trains nervous system regulation. Now, let's talk about mental framing. Don't think of cold showers as punishment. Think of them as training. Not suffering adaptation, not discipline, conditioning, not torture, therapy. Because biologically, that's exactly what they are. Now, let's talk about identity change. After 30 days of cold exposure, something subtle happens. You stop seeing yourself as someone who avoids discomfort. You start seeing yourself as someone who can handle it. That identity shift changes everything. How you approach challenges, how you manage stress, how you handle pressure, how you view discomfort. how confident you feel, how resilient you become, and identity drives behavior. Now, let's talk about modern comfort culture. We live in a world designed to eliminate discomfort. Climate control, soft beds, instant food, dopamine on demand, endless entertainment, convenience everything. But nervous systems that never experience stress become fragile. Cold exposure restores what modern comfort removed: adaptive stress, not trauma training. This is why cold showers improve emotional stability, stress tolerance, focus, energy, confidence, mood, sleep, discipline, mental toughness, resilience, all through one habit. Now, let's zoom out. Cold showers don't change your life. They change your nervous system. Now, let S bring everything together, because once you understand what's really happening beneath the surface, you'll realize cold showers aren't about cold at all. They're about control. Control over your stress. Control over your emotions, control over your reactions, control over your energy, control over your mind. Most people spend their lives trying to control the outside world circumstances, people, money, time, but the one thing that truly determines quality of life is internal regulation. Cold exposure trains exactly that, not through motivation, not through affirmations, not through mindset hacks, through physiology, through your nervous system, through direct biological rewiring. Now, let us talk about what happens to your brain identity after 30 days, because this is where the transformation becomes permanent. After about a month of consistent cold exposure, your nervous system begins operating at a different baseline. Stress no longer spikes as sharply. Recovery happens faster. Emotions stabilize quicker. Focus sharpens more easily. Energy sustains longer. Confidence feels quieter but stronger. You're not hyped. You're not wired. You're not overspent. You're regulated. And regulation is the highest form of power. Most people live in either overstimulation or exhaustion. Cold exposure creates balance. Now, let's talk about decision making. Stress hijacks decision quality. When your nervous system is dysregulated, your brain shifts from rational processing to emotional survival mode. That leads to impulsive choices, overthinking, avoidance, procrastination, short-term relief behaviors, poor emotional regulation. Cold showers reverse this by strengthening your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for logic, planning, impulse control, emotional regulation, and long-term thinking. After weeks of cold exposure, people notice clearer thinking, less impulsivity, better emotional restraint, improved focus, greater patience, higher discipline. Not because they tried harder, but because their brain changed. Now, let's talk about emotional strength. Emotional strength isn't suppressing emotions, it's regulating them. Cold exposure trains emotional regulation at the nervous system level. Instead of emotions overwhelming you, you experience them without losing control. Instead of stress hijacking you, you stay grounded. Instead of anxiety spiraling, you stabilize. Instead of anger exploding, you pause. Instead of sadness consuming, you process. This creates emotional resilience. not emotional numbness. You still feel deeply, but you're no longer controlled by feelings. That's mental freedom. Now, let's talk about confidence again, because this one runs deeper than people realize. Confidence isn't loud. It isn't dominance. It isn't ego. Confidence is calm under pressure. Cold exposure trains exactly that. Every time you enter cold water voluntarily, your brain records a memory. I faced discomfort and survived. That compounds soon. Your nervous system stops reacting to discomfort as danger, and that shifts your self-concept from I avoid discomfort to I handle discomfort. That identity change spills into work relationships, health challenges, boundaries, decision-making, leadership, personal growth, because people who trust themselves don't fear discomfort, they move through it. Cold exposure builds that trust quietly, daily, consistently. Now, let's talk about resilience to life stress. Life doesn't get easier, but your nervous system gets stronger. Cold exposure builds something called stress recovery speed. How fast your body returns to baseline after stress. Most people stay stressed long after the stressor ends. Cold-trained nervous systems recover faster. That means less emotional hangover, less rumination, less burnout, less fatigue, less irritability, less overwhelm. You don't avoid stress. You bounce back faster. That's resilience. Now let's talk about mental clarity. Cold exposure improves cerebral blood flow, neurotransmitter balance, oxygen utilization, and autonomic regulation. This leads to sharper focus, clearer thinking, better memory, improved reaction time, less brain fog, more mental stamina. People often describe this as, I feel mentally clean. My brain feels sharper. I can think again. I feel present. My mind feels calm but alert. That's nervous system regulation, not stimulation. Unlike caffeine or sugar, which spike and crash, cold exposure stabilizes and sustains. Now, let's talk about willpower, because cold showers change how your brain handles resistance. Willpower isn't infinite, but cold exposure trains effort tolerance, your brain's capacity to stay engaged during discomfort. This rewires your anterior cingulate cortex, the brain region responsible for effort, regulation, persistence, discipline, focus, under difficulty, mental endurance. Every time you stay in cold water instead of escaping, this circuit strengthens. That makes hard tasks feel easier, discomfort feel manageable, resistance feel weaker, procrastination feels smaller. Not because you're forcing discipline, but because your brain adapts. Now, let's talk about dopamine again, but deeper. Dopamine isn't pleasure. It's motivation. It's drive. It's pursuit energy. Modern life overstimulates dopamine, leading to craving, burnout, emotional instability, low motivation, and focus collapse. Cold exposure recalibrates dopamine by increasing baseline levels, reducing dependence on artificial stimulation, improving reward sensitivity, stabilizing motivation, enhancing drive. This is why people practicing cold exposure often report less scrolling, less sugar cravings. Less caffeine dependence, less impulsivity, more motivation, more focus, more discipline. Not because they tried, but because their dopamine system Now, let's talk about mental toughness, but not the toxic version. Mental toughness isn't suppressing pain. It isn't ignoring emotions. It isn't grinding through burnout. True mental toughness is nervous system stability under stress. Cold exposure builds exactly that. You're not numbing yourself. You're regulating yourself. You're not hardening emotionally. You're strengthening emotionally. You're not becoming cold. You're becoming calm. That's power. Now, let's talk about identity rewiring. Habits don't change behavior. Identity changes behavior. Cold exposure changes identity. After 30 days, people stop seeing themselves as someone who avoids discomfort, someone who panics under stress, someone who lacks discipline, someone who gives up easily, someone who struggles with consistency, and start seeing themselves as someone who handles discomfort, someone who stays calm under pressure, someone who follows through, someone who is mentally strong, someone who trusts themselves. Identity shifts drive long-term change. Cold exposure rewires identity quietly, daily, physiologically. Now, let's talk about emotional immunity. Just like physical immunity builds through exposure, emotional immunity builds through stress exposure, not avoidance. Cold exposure trains your nervous system to experience stress without collapsing. This builds immunity to anxiety, overwhelm, burnout, panic, emotional instability, stress reactivity, not by numbing, but by strengthening. Now, let's talk about mental clarity under chaos. Most people can function when life is calm. Few can function when life is chaotic. Cold exposure trains calm under chaos. When your nervous system is trained to regulate under cold stress, everyday stress feels manageable. Deadlines don't overwhelm. Conflict doesn't destabilize. Pressure doesn't paralyze. Uncertainty doesn't spiral. You don't need calm environments. You bring calm internally. That's freedom. Now, let's talk about why cold showers beat motivation hacks. Motivation fades. Willpower depletes. Inspiration disappears. Cold exposure rewires your physiology. Instead of forcing calm, your nervous system becomes calm. Instead of chasing focus, your brain becomes focused. Instead of fighting anxiety, your amygdala quiets. Instead of forcing discipline, your brain adapts to effort. This is not psychology. This is biology. Cold exposure changes your baseline, not your mood temporarily. Now, let's talk about long-term mental health. Cold exposure improves stress regulation, mood stability, anxiety tolerance, depression, resilience, sleep quality, focus, energy, motivation, cognitive performance, emotional regulation. All through neurotransmitter balance, vagal tone, neuroplasticity, hormetic stress adaptation, inflammation reduction, autonomic regulation. This isn't wellness hype, it's nervous system science. Now let's talk about life performance. When your nervous system is regulated, you think clearer, You act calmer. You recover faster, you focus longer, you handle pressure better, you sleep deeper, you feel stronger, you trust yourself more, you perform better. Cold exposure improves performance not by adding energy, but by removing internal noise. Now, let's talk about resistance again, because this is where most people quit. Your brain hates cold exposure because it threatens comfort, not safety. But comfort addiction weakens nervous systems. Cold exposure reverses comfort addiction. Not through suffering, through adaptation. The first 5 to 7 days feel hardest. After that, resistance drops. After 14 days, discipline feels natural. After 21 days, cold feels tolerable. After 30 days, cold feels empowering. Not because the cold changed, because your nervous system changed. Now let's talk about how to maximize results. If you want full brain rewiring from cold showers, do them consistently, daily is best. Focus on breathing, slow nasal breathing, relax your muscles, face, jaw, shoulders, stay present, don't distract, stay long enough, 60 to 180 seconds. Don't chase suffering, chase calm, combine with morning sunlight if possible. Avoid cold late at night if it disrupts sleep. Cold exposure works best when paired with good sleep movement, sunlight, hydration, protein intake, stress management, but even alone, it works. Now, let's talk about who should avoid cold exposure.